Welcome, everyone, to another Kitecast episode. I'm here with my co-host, Tim Freestone. Tim, hello, how are you doing?
Good, now that the coffee's in me.
We have a great episode ahead of us here. Richard Stiennon is joining us. He is the Chief Research Analyst at IT Harvest, a board member for various organizations such as Cephi, Quick-Heal, and Neaton, Phosphorus, a bunch of others. Hopefully I pronounced all those correctly, Richard. He has a master's degree in war. That's a whole, in the modern era. That's a whole separate podcast. Maybe we'll touch one question on that topic. I'm just curious how in the world he got into that. From King's College in London, Bachelor's of Science in Aerospace Engineering from the University of Michigan. He's a regular speaker at numerous events, including RSA, on the topic of cybersecurity and other technology-related issues. We're excited to have you join us, Richard. Thanks for your time today.
Great to be here. This is going to be fun.
So RSA is coming up. You've been at numerous RSA events. What do you think is going to be a couple of the hot topics at this coming event? Obviously, those who are watching this will be able to judge because this will be published right after
That's
RSA.
Right.
But what do you think is resonating in the marketplace when it comes to cybersecurity?
You know, it's interesting because we haven't had much time for the industry to react to the explosion of ChatGPT in the world, but that is going to be the hot topic. There are
you hit my favorite. You hit my favorite topic, Richard.
Oh, absolutely, right. It's the most exciting thing that's happened since the internet was brought about. And of course, Microsoft beat everybody to the punch. I had a couple of press releases, that were under embargo from vendors about how they were integrating basically the large language model and have a conversational way to interact with your data. And Microsoft beat them to the punch. Now they had, a little extra time, but still it's unbelievably fast for Microsoft to do anything, right? And
right.
Less than 3 months, they integrated ChatGPT essentially into their security data offerings. So pretty cool.
Yeah. They got it the first time out of the gate too.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. The other thing I saw them do, Richard, just recently is their because one of the things is like data sovereignty and data privacy, and not just you as a person using GPT, but the data that you want GPT to, let's query for lack of a better term, but they've created an Azure cloud environment, cloud storage environment, where you can put your data to ensure that as much as Microsoft can ensure this, it doesn't leak, and GPT doesn't use it, can't store it, can't see it, and you can use that large language model to basically query just your data, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big leap for a lot of companies to be able to be much more effective and faster at how they leverage their security info and security alerts and all those things in a secure manner. Whereas, without that sort of ring fencing of your data that Microsoft is allowing for, you'd be pretty hard pressed to just trust OpenAI that your data is secure, right?
Right. Absolutely. I actually had to face that because, I've got a platform for researching the cybersecurity industry, and everything relies on me keeping at least, the list of vendors, of which are 3,375 today, keeping that out of the hands of somebody who wants to just repost it as a spreadsheet somewhere or build a business based on it. Right. So all of my business's income depends on keeping that data safe. So how do I incorporate ChatGPT so I can query that data? So we just, took a few extra steps. And as we pass the data to OpenAI, we obfuscate the vendor name. So OpenAI can get all the data on all the vendors and how much they're funded and how much they grew, but it doesn't know who that data lines up with. So
that makes it pretty useless.
GPT-5 will be able to figure out in a second. So we have to iterate fast.
Yeah, before it gets caught.
Sure.
Well, I saw, to Tim's point, there were certain large companies who had banned ChatGPT for the reasons you just specified, because they had employees who were dumping it into the public pool and they didn't want their private data floating around in the ChatGPT cloud, if you may. In fact, there's like a module in AI PRM, which you're both familiar with, where you can use that to block your data from actually being used by the ChatGPT cloud. So it's interesting to just see all the permutations that are happening in virtual real time in front of us, right? So, Richard,
People
you brought up. Go ahead.
We could go on forever about it, but people are embedding white space or text in white in their documents. So if they show up and somebody queries and it gives the answer, it'll say, this was created or generated by an AI or something like that.
Yeah. So as you look at AI and cybersecurity, there's good uses for AI. There's nefarious uses for AI. I assume as you look at RSA and where the industry's headed, both are going to happen, right? We saw that we have guardrails in ChatGPT when it was first announced back in December. No one can use this for cyber attacks or anything that's malicious, and within 2 weeks, people are already using it for that. Where do you see that conversation headed?
Yeah, it certainly lowers the bar for so-called script kiddies, right? And it makes for people who develop exploits and attacks for a living, makes their job a lot easier. So it's taking everybody's abilities and multiplying them by 100. So now you can write your own exploits. You can deploy them and package them, do whatever you want with them with assistance from OpenAI. And that to me is that's just what comes with having that power. But it also means the defenders have to stay on top of their game and start using these capabilities. Somebody posted, "Oh my gosh, this is great! I'm going to automate AI to actually send sales emails for me, and they'll be perfectly crafted and take into account the recipient and all this stuff." And everybody's all excited about that in the SDR world. And I pointed out, as soon as that starts happening, we're all going to have products that will answer those emails. And kind of a cool, it'll work out pretty cool, because now the sales bot reaches out to your email bot, and you two will negotiate whether or not you want to move to the next step. And then, the recipient will only be joining meetings that really match what they want to see.
Yeah. I was at, just your point about the good guys have to kind of race the bad guys now with this, is I was at an event with, I don't know, there was probably 50 or 60 CISOs there this a couple months ago. And I stood up and I asked a question. I said, in light of this, are you looking at your own organization and thinking about roles that are specifically tailored to leveraging AI models in combat for against the bad actors who are leveraging AI models for the threats? And it was crickets. It was almost as if nobody had thought about the idea that you need to start changing your org structure in light of this. And I can guarantee you there are pockets of nation states that have 50 AI prompt engineers sitting there building threats to attack. Now, what I can't quite figure out yet is why nothing major has happened yet. Like, I haven't seen in the news or any, first malware built by AI GPT attacks Bank of America, flattens the entire banking industry. Like, I'm just waiting for this massive wave of problems to come. It just still hasn't yet, which is interesting. If you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I always keep an eye open for those things that you think, because they're doable, they should happen, right? And when I think of the NSA in particular, who you rarely hear about their exploits, or getting out, right? We can name the few cases, Flame, Stuxnet, but you have to assume, and you should as a defender, that the NSA actually is effectively attacking and exploiting and covering their tracks. And that may be true for Chinese and possibly GRU and SRV attackers as well.
Yeah.
You see anyone
that's a good point
in the cybersecurity space, Richard, who is tapping into this AI trend, or like Tim reported, are they still just thinking about it or not even thinking about it? Do we have a few early leaders in the cybersecurity space?
Yeah, Radware has a division. Can't remember I think it's called Cyberhawk. Yeah, Cyberhawk. And they've incorporated GPT into their threat hunting capability. Radware, not Radware, Recorded Future announced theirs already. And then, oh man, I get confused. You'll understand why. I think it's Hawk Cyber. It's a standalone vendor, and they too have introduced AI. It's gonna take a while, right? People have to try it out. Once it's introduced to them, they have to try it out, work it into their processes, and it's going to take several months before people start going, "Wow, this is really helping our productivity of our SOC analysts, etc."
Sure.
There's a plethora of different use cases that will just begin. I suspect we'll hear about some of those. There'll be press releases and announcements that take place at RSA, but over the coming year, the number of use cases are just going to burgeon rapidly. We won't be able to count them.
As somebody tweeted after ChatGPT, hit, after we got to 5 million users, which only took about a day and a half, somebody said there are already more use cases for ChatGPT in a day and a half than there were for all of blockchain in, 14 years.
Yeah. Well, and you listen to any of the pundits in this area, and some of the people who have been doing this since the 80s, they're also shocked. They had no clue that this was going to happen so quickly, right?
Yeah.
6 months ago, some of these leaders, I've listened to these podcasts, if they were asked when you could have a conversation with an automated agent that hadn't made any sense at all, let alone incredibly intelligent by the standards of humanity, they were like, I don't know, 10, maybe 15 years. And it was, 6 months later. Right. So it's just, I don't know. Everybody's looking at what's next. Right.
That's right. I look for evidence that the OpenAI and Google DeepMind, engineers knew beforehand what this would be like, and they didn't. Right. Mm-hmm. So they were excited about what they had and all this, but they had no idea it would find so many use cases so quickly.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about AI for a long, long period of time, and the nirvana never had really been reached until this occurred. So I think everyone had that perception that, we're still talking about AI. Yeah, it's going to move the ball down the field a couple of yards, here or there, but it's not going to move it down the field 40 or 50 yards is what transpired with ChatGPT.
Yep. It's amazing times.
So you've been at IT Harvest for 5 or 6 years now. Talk a bit about the organization, what you guys do, and what your research entails. What are you looking at?
Sure. Yeah. So I created IT Harvest, with a template from my experience at Gartner, right? It was basically a vehicle for me to do what I love doing, which is talking to people, researching the cybersecurity industry, writing books. But then I did write a book, Security Yearbook. This is the latest edition. And in the back of it, I printed a directory of all the vendors. I think there were 2,200 in the first edition, and now we're up to 3,300. And only last year, I realized that, hey, this is something that changes so quickly. The book is a really poor point in time because, by the time I go to press, there are 200 new vendors and 200 that have been acquired. So I need an app to make that data available as fast as it happens. So we built that last year, and it's totally pivoted what I guess I'm trying to do. So we are now a data-driven analyst firm. So every analyst firm in the world is driven by expertise. They've got analysts on board and published research. So the analysts spend some time, not much, but some out of their very busy schedules talking to customers. They spend some time creating this research that they publish once a year, which doesn't answer any of your questions, right? It's always going to be, hey, last year when Gartner sent out the questionnaire for the Magic Quadrant, this is where everybody stood in a point in time. But things change fast. So, so I realized, especially as we integrate AI tools, this is going to be kind of a new version of the industry analyst business model.
Interesting. So you have ChatGPT or some AI capability built into the app that you're using today,
Right.
based on what you said earlier.
Correct. Yeah, you can converse with the data on a single vendor or on all the vendors. So you can ask it, how is the application security market faring in the Bay Area or something like that.
And where is
wants
that?
to
It's on your
engage you.
website?
Yeah, if you're on the website, just click on dashboard and you'll get to it. But mind you, you're going to hit a paywall really fast.
Yeah, okay, got
My
it.
question, I think this is monetized.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you do an annual report, and then the data's in virtual real time that feeds into the actual app?
Right. Yep. Yeah, we update the data on headcount and funding at least every month for all 3,300 vendors.
And when is the 2020? You referenced this earlier. When's your 2023 report coming out?
So the Security Yearbook 2023 should come out in time for Black Hat. So
July timeframe.
And then I'm not ready to announce this because I haven't signed the contract, but I'm going to turn over the 5th edition to a publisher, and they're going to take it globally. So it's going to be fun.
Interesting. Oh, that's great. So anything that you can talk about beyond ChatGPT that you're seeing that is resonating in the marketplace, maybe a preview of what we might find in the 2023 yearbook?
Yeah. First of all, the picture of how we did from an investment standpoint last year, almost $17 billion invested in cybersecurity companies last year. But you compare that.
It was quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm, as I finish a chapter, of course, I pretty much post it to my Substack. So you won't have to buy the book if you just go to the Substack, other than the fact that I've got interviews with founders and pioneers in the industry in the book. And this year we're adding Eva Chen, who is one of the founders and now CEO of Trend Micro. Marty Resch, who founded SourceFire. So we've got all their stories in here because I'm trying to capture the history of our industry while all the pioneers are still with us, right? They can still talk about and are excited to talk about what they did.
Yep.
Yeah, with all that funding, especially the past 5 or 6 years, I've been thinking about how hard it's got to be a cybersecurity professional at any company right now from many different angles. One is just being bombarded by people like me and my team to get the attention. So it just becomes numb. And that causes you to miss things you need to see, right? And so do you have any insight there on, in your circles, what cybersecurity professionals are doing to make good, well-informed decisions and not miss the trends in the market? And it's just a tough question to answer, I know, but it's getting worse and worse.
Yeah, and I've thought about it, and I see this gap developing because, for years and years, large companies especially would just have a relationship with Gartner or Forrester or IDC. And the decision processes were slower, right? It's like, should we use IBM or Amdahl? That's what Gartner was founded, was to answer that question. And so there are only a few major IT questions to ask. But now, there are 3,000 cybersecurity companies. There are 15,000 fintech companies, period. And I don't even know how many, market automation companies there are, right? It's just unbelievable how much there is to discuss. When I see most CISOs think that they're experts on the industry. And quite a few of them want to be industry analysts. So they even start their own industry analyst firms. They think because they're talking to vendors every single day that they've got a complete picture of the industry. They don't. You can't talk to as many vendors as an industry analyst does. That's their sole job, is to understand what's happening in the industry. But you can't ask everybody to go and spend $70,000 a year on a Gartner relationship. And even if you did, you couldn't get the analyst time because it takes 3 months to schedule a call. So I'm hopeful that the gap will close thanks to AI. So you'll be able, so you can at least get, rather than when you're looking for a new product, wait for a Gartner Magic Quadrant to come out, which could lag 3 years behind the development of the technology. Just be able to, hey, I want to know all the, data security posture management vendors. And then I'll, my team will go talk to them or pick the ones that aren't in China or Vietnam, that we know we're not going to do business with, and narrow down the list and look at the ones that are growing. Growing indicates that they've got happy customers, and get a proof of concept from the top 3. That's the way it should be.
I didn't want that to lead into the answer being, well, AI will solve it, but it sounds like it did.
It won't. It won't quite solve it because there's a place for curation and expertise, and that'll still be there for 2 generations of AI. Who knows what comes next?
Yeah, it is a good answer though to think, and I don't know, I just hadn't thought about it, but the idea of being able to query at least a good section of the market, and then be able to have it, give a consolidated view of customer reviews across multiple review sites, and then negative and positive sentiment analysis, and you can kind of curate it down to like 5, and then you have to do your due diligence, right? But you really did, I guess, skip past the Gartner process, I guess, is one way to look at it.
Right. Yeah. And, it's difficult with, unfortunately, Gartner's got a review site, and there are 4 or 5 other ones for enterprise products. Unfortunately, as soon as those review sites become popular tools, then the vendors game them to just pump them full of positive reviews. Yeah.
We've never done that, Patrick, have we?
Of course you haven't.
Speaking of trends in the marketplace, we've seen this intersection of, and Tim's spoken about this at a couple different events. I've done some webinars on the topic, so has he. This confluence between compliance as well as cybersecurity. There's an overlapping, as we see all these cyber attacks and breaches take place, there is a reaction in the marketplace, whether it's at the government level or it's at the industry level, to implement different compliance standards and regulations to hopefully prevent those from happening in the future. Are you seeing a closer integration between those two? Are the security vendors talking about them? Are the security leaders like CISOs, CIOs, and so forth? Are they looking at compliance and cybersecurity as being in the same bucket, if you may?
Yeah, certainly it falls under the CISO's responsibility, right? And compliance is a little more annoying than pure cybersecurity, because it's like, here you go, here's a list of things you have to do, and there's a time schedule, then they have to be done by the time we audit, and point in time you must be compliant. After that, you got 12 months or 2 years before you have to recomply, right? But that means there's budget. There's also board support for it. Hey, we've got 10 customers. We're kind of in purgatory with them because they're waiting for us to be ISO compliant. So, okay, where's our ISO program? Who's going to lead that? And let's do that. And now, sometime this month, the SEC is supposed to issue its guidance recommendations on cybersecurity reporting for public companies. Don't forget, the SEC also regulates private equity and hedge funds, so they too are going to enter this space. I'm actually getting people reaching out who sit on boards, CFOs of very large companies, saying, "Hey, I'm thinking I should get educated on cybersecurity," which is a great sign, really, really good sign. So, I'm always happy that compliance drives investment and thinking about security. And lately, even though the compliance is a long path from a problem arising, government reacting, going, oh my God, this is horrible. A pipeline company suffered from ransomware. How do we solve that? Come up with some guidance and requirements for those parts of the world that they control. And that eventually works its way into a regulation or a compliance regime. But it takes up to 10 years for that to happen. So it's, the best compliance organizations that I know look ahead, okay, what is going to happen, in this compliance regime a year from now? What's the current draft look like? Should we comment on that and try and influence the direction of it? Or we're moving into Singapore or the Philippines. What are their privacy regulations? And oh my gosh, we can go to jail. The CEO could go to jail if they violate some of these things. So you have to have that view around the world too.
There's over 80 countries with different data privacy regulations in place today, and the number continues to grow. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, what was I going to say? Oh, it's interesting because for me, cybersecurity, at least in the last 5 years, has kind of been table stakes, but also it's been a potential business problem. But compliance is a definite business problem.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's why like boards are starting to come out of the woodworks, because if you don't, for sure, there's a stick with money behind it that's coming your way. Whereas, security is maybe you definitely need to do some security, but just the imminence of compliance and that stick of fines and penalties, and that's a business problem you can't kind of dance around, right? So
it's a lot easier to sell too, because you can say, hey, look here's your value proposition. You, at the end of spending all this money, you will be able to show that you're in compliance. All the, purely defensive, proactive cybersecurity solutions say, you might be attacked and you might suffer a major breach, and you deploy all this stuff and we're going to reduce the possibility of that. We're not going to eliminate it. It's always possible, but you can't measure how much you're going to reduce it. And it's really hard to do that return on investment calculation.
Right. They do try to do the return on investment calculation, but it's generally it's fuzzy. It's fuzzy at best.
Yeah, I've been helping build some of those models, and you have to rely on a breach costs, according to Poneman, costs $3.5 million for your industry sector, and we're only asking you to put up $100,000, and we're going to reduce that breach possibility.
Cybersecurity insurance companies are still trying to figure out that equation, right? Or the insurance companies need to understand what that risk looks like, and they keep increasing their premiums because I don't think they've figured it out yet. To just go back on the NIST, on the standards, we sort of see NIST as being one of the frameworks that is the most proactive, that's looking forward in terms of, if you do these things, then you really are going to mitigate your risk associated with these cyber attacks that could actually target specific vulnerabilities within your environment. Is that the one that you're seeing take hold in the marketplace, or are there others? Do you have an opinion on that front?
Yeah, certainly here in the U.S., it's completely taken hold, and I credit that with one. It's free and open, unlike a lot of standards that you got to pay $75 just to get the stupid PDF. And it's flexible, right? It's very generic. Just these are the things you got to do, and they moved a little bit away from their risk management language. As has this current administration has totally moved away from talking about risk management, right? They're talking about real detailed, how do we get to where you are using multi-factor authentication and doing all these things.
When we look at what they're targeting, we believe data, they're an organization's sensitive content and the communication specifically from our vantage point are being targeted by cyber criminals or all these rogue nation states. And you look at the data, like I just looked at the new M-Trends Mandiant report. It showed that data obviously is a key target there. I don't have the data. Like 22% of the initial infection vectors was related to the data. That, and we're going to have the Verizon Data Breach Investigations report come out next week. I suspect it's going to corroborate the same narrative. What's your opinion in terms of what do you need to focus on as an organization, or what else do you need to focus on as an organization once you get beyond the network, once you get beyond the applications, once you get beyond your workloads? Is content the next area that everyone needs to lock down and make sure that they have protected?
Yeah, and I don't think that's a future thing. I think that's what it's always been, right? That was and the oldest, as I started to write the history of the industry, I realized, hey, there's plenty of history in the encryption world, and many, many books on it. No books on the history of the rest of the industry. So I cover the history of encryption, but that, it's amazing. We have the capability to completely lock down and control who has access to our data. It's just really hard to work out. Right? It's, to deploy okay, we're going to encrypt everything. All right, but you probably shouldn't use the same keys to encrypt everything. And you have to rekey encrypted data on a fairly frequent basis, once every 2 or 3 years. We're facing that, kind of looming occurrence of quantum computing that will force us to re-encrypt everything really quickly. And so we've got the basis. We know how to do it. Just like, we used to know how to protect the network, right? You just close down all the ports except for, 4 or 5 of them, and then inspect all the traffic after that. Piece of cake. And yet here we are. We still don't do a good job of that. So I do look a lot at anybody who's in the key management space. How are they going to do that? And then anybody who can get down to the granular permissions, because, you create a document. If I post this to Substack, I want everybody to see it. And I'm not going to ask them to, decrypt it first, right? I don't need that step. But if it's a private communication, then it should be encrypted. But how do I determine who gets to use it? And it's less valuable in an organization if it can't be shared internally. So how do you make it completely shareable by anybody in the organization? But if they download it and send it out, then it's not readable. And that's a very difficult problem.
The proliferation.
Yeah, Richard, I have a solution for that problem. It's called Kiteworks.
What a coincidence.
Just shameless plug.
Yep, exactly. That's, so it's a great, great problem to tackle. Obviously, it's a hard sell.
Yeah.
It's a hard sell because, your prospects are going to say, wait a minute, why do I have to protect everything when there's only these few things, the crown jewels that really need to be protected? And the answer is because you don't know what the crown jewels are. You cannot determine those by getting your team together and saying, what's the most valuable asset and how, what would happen if it was stolen? You can't do that because the attacker is the one who determines what your crown jewels are. My favorite example is RSA, who, reading between the lines, apparently generated the secret seeds for the RSA secure ID token and stored them in, I hope it's a database, but it could have been a spreadsheet. Because
I think it was a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I think it's a spreadsheet. And, they thought, well, that's important, but man, even if somebody has a secret seed, it would be almost impossible. They even told the SEC it will highly unlikely that anybody could use these. But that's what China wanted. And that they had multiple teams working on that project. Get me all the secure ID secret seeds. And they did. And use that to attack Lockheed, who was actually the target. RSA wasn't the target. They just had the means to get there.
Yeah. You bring up, that was a long time ago. I forgot about that problem.
2010 feels like yesterday.
Yeah. RSA turned that entire event into a good roadshow, basically talking about what happened, how they were resilient, how they bounced back, lessons learned, all those types of things. Right. It was a good example of turning something really, really awful into a lesson learned for the industry.
Right.
Where do you see, you talked about it's kind of hard to ascertain what are your crown jewels, what is sensitive content. Where do you see this concept of data classification and being able to classify your data? Maybe it's an AI issue in an automated manner so that you can't share that to third parties who shouldn't have access to it. You can't share it to internal folks who shouldn't have access to it based on how it's classified. Do you see certain organizations maturing in that space?
I haven't seen much progress because we had the capability with so-called data leak prevention solutions to do something like that, right? The early ones would be two parts to them. They'd have a network thing that back when there was a single perimeter, and they would monitor all the traffic both ways. And if they ever saw, sensitive information or whatever, they would block it. And they could do it too. They'd go to all your data stores and they would take hashes of all the little tiny segments. They have huge libraries of hashes. If anything ever matched, then you could block it. Nobody deployed that. They maybe deployed it in looking for things you could find with regular expressions, right? Social security numbers, identifiers, health records. Or they set it on alert, without blocking. So they could tell you after the fact that a breach happened. So it's, that, and it's just because of that heavy lifting and the dispersal of the problem to, a very, very large surface area. Same.
And also all the false positives that they would throw off and block stuff that shouldn't have been blocked. It's not an easy solve, obviously. An entire industry failed at it, basically.
Yep. And when you think about false positives, we're all security people, and we'd rather have a false positive than a false negative.
False negative.
Yeah, we don't mind that sometimes an administrator has to go in and fix a problem for a user, but it's not the case with the user. They're like, why the heck didn't you let me send this file? Right. It's part of my job.
And it becomes really, really important when it's the CEO's stuff that gets blocked that they send to the board or whatever.
Or, in the military, if it's a 2-star, they will not allow it. It's just like somebody could get, I don't know what your punishment is in the military, but not put up for promotion if you were the one who blocked Telnet on your network, which they still use inside the Pentagon.
You do a lot of board work, Richard. It dates back a number of years. We've had a lot of discussions around boards need to have a security expert on them. They need to have an advisory board, at least, that looks at cybersecurity. What are you seeing transpire in that space? I suspect that's why you're on some of these boards in the first place. Some of them are entrepreneurial startups based on your LinkedIn profile. But where are things headed there? What should organizations be paying attention to when they decide who's on their board and who isn't on their board?
Well, first of all, I'm not on any boards because of my cybersecurity expertise. I could be. I'm on boards because of my industry expertise. So, and I can tell you, all the board meetings I've been at, security has not come up once.
Wow. Really?
Ever. Huh. Never comes up. So now, mind you, these are security companies. So they know what they're doing already. Yeah. But I suspect that's the case across the boards. The CISO gets called in once a year, maybe once a quarter, to report on status and ask for more resources. And I think that I would like to see that change. The SEC's requirement apparently is going to be that the public companies must report the security expertise of any board member, which, that sounds like a two-edged sword. Do you want to say, hey, this board member spent some time as a CISO or something like that? Or is it better to say nothing, right? We don't have any experts on board, so you're not going to pin anything on any of them, the board members. Um, the one thing I'd like to see change is the way CISOs communicate with boards, because that's part of their role. And I want them to stop using the business language, which is what everybody has told CISOs to do for 25 years I've been in this business. Obviously, it's not working, right? The message is not getting through. If you step into a board and you start, quantifying everything in risk models, and speaking the CFO's language, first of all, you had to learn their language, which is a secret language that they hold tightly. And once you're communicating in it, they know exactly how to counter it, right? They say, okay, we're going to buy insurance to cover that risk. But I know when I talk to security experts, people who are actually doing the research and countering exploits, they go way into the weeds, and I love it. And I think that's how you should talk to the boards. Go into the weeds, mystify them with your language, spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because you've got to live with that. You should share your fear, because boards, they're just people, though that generally they are old white guys, and they don't make these considered decisions based on all the facts and all that stuff. They're just old white guys sitting in a boardroom, relying on their personal experience from past things that they know and spouting off opinions, and the person with the strongest personality wins. And so therefore you have to, get them in their emotions, get them to feel that their company has some critical stuff, and this group sitting in this building in Beijing wants that critical stuff, and they will stop at nothing, even, hiring your employees away or hiring somebody into your organization to steal it. So they go, oh my God, what can we do to stop that from happening? We don't need that.
That's probably the wisest, most candid response I've ever heard about how to manage a board, and it's 100% accurate, because everybody's been telling the CISOs to talk business models, and how you described every board member is 100%. I think they're looking at the if-then factors of a spreadsheet, and no, they got 40 years of experience. They trust their gut. Hit the gut, right?
Yep. Hit the gut.
Wise.
That's a good way to say it. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
There's actual organizations out there that have been set up to train CISOs on how to use business language, which is ironic, right? Yep. And it's not working, to your point.
Yeah. Not working at all. I understand the FBI has a really cool program at Quantico. It's 3 days, and they actually, teach the CISOs about, cyber attacks and stuff like that. It sounds really cool. And the third day, you go to the shooting range.
Nice.
So that'd be fun.
Well, that ought to be fun.
Yeah.
Well, we're about out of time, Richard. This has been a fascinating conversation. We span the spectrum in terms of topics, and our audience certainly is going to find this interesting. We need to do this again. I really enjoy
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah, we can talk about warfare.
Yeah, exactly. We need to schedule a separate podcast on that element, to your point. Once again, for our audience, for those who are looking for more information on IT Harvest and how they can access your app, as well as the security yearbooks, where can they go?
Oh, just head on over to, you find me on LinkedIn, because I'm constantly posting what I'm doing there. Find my Substack, stiennon.substack.com. And of course, you can go to IT Harvest, it-harvest.com.
Oh, that's great. Well, appreciate your time. For those in our audience who want more Kitecast, you can check us out at kiteworks.com/Kitecast. We'll look forward to having you on our next podcast. Have a great day.
Thanks
Richard. Yep.